President tonight urging the GOP to keep their word and get the job done. We will break down what needs to happen. Also, President Trump firing back at Hillary Clinton for attacking his major speech to the UN. Clinton called the address dark and dangerous while completely ignoring her own role in aiding North Korea and Iran's nuclear ambitions. Tonight, we correct the record. Also, we'll educate liberals in the mainstream media. We'll give them a Hannity history lesson. And President Trump has made a decision about the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. Is he ready to kill the agreement once and for all? We cover all of that in tonight's Breaking News opening monologue. All right, tonight, GOP senators, they have until September the 30th to keep their word and now kill off Obamacare, or they're going to face consequences at the ballot box in 2018. Now, Senators Lindsey Graham, Bill Cassidy, they offered up an amendment that's gaining momentum, and Republicans, in my opinion, albeit imperfect, they need to seize this opportunity. Now, while meeting with foreign leaders at the UN, President Trump, he weighed in on this latest attempt to end Obamacare. Let's take a look.
I believe that Graham Cassidy really will do it the right way, and it is doing it the right way. There's tremendous support from Republicans. Certainly, we're at 47 or 48 already senators, and a lot of others are looking at it very positively. For 7 years, I've been hearing repeal. We've been hearing how bad it is. We've been looking at the premiums go up. We've been looking at deductibles that have been through the roof. You have states like Arizona where the premiums are going to be worse this year than last year. Last year they were at 100% increase, 116%. I think there's tremendous support for it. I think it's actually much better than the previous shot, which was very sadly let down. I thought that when I won, I would go to the Oval Office, sit down at my desk, and there would be a health care bill on my desk, to be honest. And it hasn't worked out that way, and I think a lot of Republicans are embarrassed by it. But I have to tell you, I think they're going to do a great job. If this happens, it will be a great thing for the country.
I'll be the first to say this is not a perfect bill by any means, but we learned a lot about Republicans in this process. About 100 in the House, 7 in the Senate. They clearly had no intention of ever really repealing and replacing Obamacare. Now the question is, can we begin the process of making health care better for you, the American people? Or in the end, this is what it's going to come down to. You keep Obamacare, skyrocketing premiums and deductibles, and of course, lack of health care options all around the country. It is crushing average Americans every day. So here are the big things that Cassidy and Graham, and what it does. It does replace Obamacare subsidies with block grants to states, and then states will have the flexibility to choose how best to spend that money instead of adhering to big government mandates. I've always believed in block grants. The massive budget-busting Medicaid expansion, that'll be scaled back. Insurers, they will be able to offer, finally, it's illegal now, catastrophic plans that people can actually afford. Obamacare, it prevents consumers from even having that option. Health savings accounts, that will be expanded, as well as cooperatives. Now, Republicans, they need to get moving. They need to start keeping their promises. We, on this program, we will continue to hold them accountable until it gets done and ultimately done right. Also tonight, well, Hillary Clinton, she is refusing to go away. The twice failed former presidential candidate now attacking President Trump, what I thought was one of his best speeches at the United Nations, including taking issue with his term Rocket Man, the nickname for Kim Jong-un. Watch this.
I thought it was very dark, dangerous, not the kind of message that the leader of the greatest nation in the world should be delivering. We call on all nations to work with us to try to end the threat posed by Kim Jong-un and not call him Rocket Man, the old Elton John song, but to say clearly we will not tolerate any attacks on our friends or ourselves.
North Korea is not our friend. Now, here's the problem. The left-wing media in this country, you know what? They're losing it over President Trump in his speech, just like Hillary. And we'll give you the history lesson in a second. Watch this.
He wasn't a president. He was a preacher up there, given his dark world view.
It's difficult to applaud to a line that parts of the world are going to hell. This was a very somber dark speech.
I thought that was one of many examples of how intellectually confused, if not outright incoherent, this speech was.
It's really frightening to hear an American president talk about obliterating any other country.
The rhetoric was irresponsible. It was put many world leaders on edge, and frankly, it was contradictory in many, many places.
I'd call it a simplistic axis of evil speech on steroids. I mean,
hold on, one more time. Simplistic axis of evil on steroids.
He's talking about going back to the 19th century. It may play to the base, but for most of the people in the room, they're going to leave with a lot of indigestion.
This was an unusual speech for an American president. Does it have any of the hallmarks of unusual speeches by other countries' presidents? Does this go down in the history of weird UN speeches?
It is certainly an unusual speech, a weird speech, Rocket Man, insulting Kim Jong-un.
Here's what's nuts. They're more angry at Donald Trump than they are at the guy that's firing missiles over Japan on a regular basis, that has nuclear capability, that he may marry to ICBM capability and threaten the whole world. We'll have more on the insane liberal media with Joe Concha and Leslie Marshall in just a minute. But first, I want to get back to Hillary and give this little history lesson going after President Trump. Hillary has no business criticizing anybody on foreign policy. You want to know why we're in this situation? Because her and her husband, they set the stage for this dangerous situation for the entire world with Pyongyang. Because Hillary also had a direct hand, and she brokered this idiotic nuclear deal with Iran. Now, we all remember what a disaster the whole Russia reset thing was. And since Clinton, liberals, the mainstream, destroyed Trump media seem to have forgotten. Here's the Hannity history lesson. Let's flash back to 1994. That's the year Bill Clinton, he thought it was a great idea to trust a dictator. In that particular case, North Korean leader Kim Jong-il, who is Kim Jong-un's father. Now, Clinton tried to bribe Pyongyang, North Korea, into freezing and stopping the nuclear program, and he gave them $4 billion of your money in energy aid. And Clinton was so proud of the deal that he even went on TV and said, "There's a good deal for the American people." Look where we are now, Mr. Clinton. Take a look.
This is a good deal for the United States. North Korea will freeze and then dismantle its nuclear program. South Korea and our other allies will be better protected. The entire world will be safer as we slow the spread of nuclear weapons. South Korea, with support from Japan and other nations, will bear most of the cost of providing North Korea with fuel to make up for the nuclear energy it is losing. And they will pay for an alternative power system for North Korea that will allow them to produce electricity while making it much harder for them to produce nuclear weapons. The United States and international inspectors will carefully monitor North Korea to make sure it keeps its commitments. Only as it does so will North Korea fully join the community of nations.
Yeah, a lot of good that worked out. Now, it's so easy to figure out what happened next because appeasement, capitulation of dictators, despots, it never works. And Kim Jong-il, he quickly broke his word, and by the end of the 90s, North Korea began testing missiles. Then in 2006, they conducted their first nuclear test, and then once Obama got into office, North Korea's aggression increased dramatically, all while Obama was literally gutting America's strategic defense capabilities. Then, of course, we got Iran. And Hillary Clinton leading the way early on, negotiating this disastrous nuclear deal there. She paved the way for Obama to give the radical mullahs in Iran over $100 billion, plain loads of cash and other currencies. And as terrible as that agreement is, well, you know what? That may soon be coming to an end. Listen to what the president said earlier today. Finally, watch.
Have you decided to stay or to leave?
Well, I have to stay.
Okay.
I'll let you know. I'll let you know.
Now, this comes after President Trump ripped the deal during his speech yesterday to the UN General Assembly, calling it an embarrassment for America. Liberals, they're freaking out that the president dared to say what he said. But let's remind the left what they are defending. The Iran nuclear deal, that deal gave Iran up to $100+ billion in immediate sanctions relief. The deal does not prohibit the development of ballistic missiles. Tehran can partner with Russia on defensive missile systems, and Iran can buy anti-aircraft missiles. And after 8 years in conventional weapons, after 5 years. And the radical mullahs, well, guess what? They didn't have to destroy any nuclear-related facilities. Zero. Now, they, of course, can also deny access to certain nuclear sites. And Iran, on the other sites, they have at least 24 days' notice of an inspection. And they can pick the nuclear inspectors. And they're still allowed to spin their centrifuges. By the way, those restrictions expire after 10 years to 15 years, so they're still getting nuclear weapons. See a pattern here? Bill Clinton, North Korea, Hillary Clinton, Iran. This is dangerous for the entire world, and they're upset about Rocket Man. Here with reaction, the host of Michelle Malkin Investigates. Michelle Malkin, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Sean?
I'm happy the president drew a line in the sand and also put the world on notice that he's not going to hold the world hostage, fire missiles over our allies, threaten Guam, and threaten South Korea without major repercussions in this case. To me, that's strength. To the left, that's weakness.
Yeah, that's right. And the themes that were hammered by President Trump of sovereignty, security, and prosperity are somehow perceived in the warped minds of all of these liberal commentators gnashing their teeth as, quote unquote, dark and dangerous, while they ignore all of the dark and dangerous evil that is looming in Iran and North Korea and Venezuela. President Trump's message on Venezuela was extremely strong, and you never hear those leftists on those other channels ever talk about the repression and the consequences of socialism on those people and the dark and dangerous influence of that. What are they used to? What do they want out of a so-called commander-in-chief? They want Hillary Clinton there, Miss Pay-for-Play foreign policy, Miss crony socialism herself, to be doing the same usual litany of genuflection, capitulation, and then rinse and then repeat with toothless sanctions as the only thing they ever wave as their threat against these existential threats to America and the world.
Yeah, that to me says it all. I mean, if he marries, and this is the same thing with Iran, where we are with North Korea today, we will be with Iran in probably a few short years. And that is this: if you take radicalism, radical mullahs in Iran, or you take this lunatic rocket man in North Korea, you marry him to weapons of mass destruction, and they can reach the continental United States, and we depleted our strategic defense during the Obama years, we don't have a lot of good options here. Now, Newt Gingrich was talking about kinetic answers last night. We could wipe out all their power. It would be the equivalent, I assume, of an electromagnetic pulse in the United States. Very damning, not an option we want to use. But the other option is taking out their nuclear sites and nuclear fallout and whatever he may do while we're doing that to South Korea or Japan or Guam. Not good options.
Not good options. And as you laid out so clearly in your Hannity history, which we all need these history lessons every night, Sean, these are raw deals that were left on the table for President Trump to have to contend with. And it was all of those years of capitulating to the mullocracy, allowing them to acquire all of this dangerous weaponry and technology that now we have to deal with. And yet, defending ourselves is somehow the real threat. Do you see now the meme that's being planted on social media is that Trump somehow is the one that is threatening the lives of 25 million people? He's trying to save the lives of every peaceful person on this planet.
One last thing. I saw your tweet. We've been friends for so many years. I'm frustrated with the Republicans because there's 100 in the House. There's the 7 people that voted for full repeal in 2015, against it in 2017. So our options are limited by people that never had any intention of keeping their word. We're friends. You have had to deal with serious health issues with your daughter. And you tweeted out about Jimmy Kimmel, and I don't like to get involved in kids. I'm not saying this is perfect, but for the Americans that only have one choice in all those counties in America, for the Americans that have seen $8,000 increases in premiums, when the president does his administrative actions, and governors, I think you get twice the bang for the buck than anything from the federal government. It's not quite federalism, but it's certainly better than Obamacare. It's not the best option, but I want to see that. I am not endorsing it until I read it. But it's certainly a start to let states handle it. What do you think as somebody that has had to deal with the healthcare system on such a deep and profound level?
Yeah, let me say a couple things, Sean, and thanks for asking. We are on the same page in so many ways with our frustration at the GOP establishment and how they have failed to deliver on their core campaign promises. They scooped up, they vacuumed up so much of the hard-earned money of the rank and file, promising to do a straight repeal, to do the thing that they did, that they had Obama veto, and that is not what they offered. So yes, we have to contend with something that is less than perfect. And as long as we have people who are honest who say, no, this isn't the repeal that we promised you, but it's the best that you're going to get. Ultimately, I think what this is going to do is, yes, we get the repeal of the individual and employer mandates. However, you still have the entire regulatory and subsidy structure that's causing so many of the problems that families across this nation have had to suffer because of Obamacare.
The president's going to make a big announcement on this next week, according to my sources. Administratively, he's going to make it easier for co-ops. My buddy Josh Umber, Atlas MD in Wichita, who I've been interviewing for years, and it opens up the possibility of health savings accounts. Two ideas we believe in and the Republicans should have been pushing.
No doubt. I will say this, as a mother of a chronically ill child who has had to deal with the system, who has had 3 individual health plans canceled as a direct result of the burden of Obamacare. I will say this. I know that there are many Republicans who are trying to do what they said that they were going to do, and I support each and every one of them. I also know that you've got people in Hollywood like Jimmy Kimmel who are going to demonize every last person who believes in a free market alternative to health care. And what I have to say to Jimmy Kimmel and celebrities like him is, how dare you tell us just because we have a different point of view and a different perspective on what the best delivery mechanism is for health care, that we have no compassion, that we're the cruel ones, that we're heartless. I'm sick of that. I know there are millions of families like mine that feel the same way.
Listen, you have a sick child and you lose your health care 3 times. That is unforgivable. And that's for everybody. But there are good options. I've been interviewing these people with great ideas for years, and we'll talk more about it in the days and weeks to come. Michelle, all the best to you and your family. Thank you. When we come back, mainstream media, they're losing it, absolutely losing it over Rocket Man. We'll play that next, straight ahead.
The United States has great strength and patience. But if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
President Trump at the UN yesterday with some very tough words for North Korea and its dictator, Kim Jong-un. As we showed you in our opening monologue tonight, well, it didn't take long for the establishment, Destroy Trump media, to just freak out and lose it over the president's speech, many bashing the president for being too tough on the guy that's firing rockets over Japan. In other words, Rocket Man. Anyway, should we be surprised? Here with reaction, Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall from The Hill, Joe Concha. You know what, Leslie? I'd like to see the same anger over the Iranian deal and the same anger over the rockets fired over Japan as they show with the president saying that he will defend liberty and freedom and our allies and the people of the United States over this madman. Where's the outrage over the things that really matter on your side? Because it never ends. If Trump gave $5 million to every American, it still would anger people on your side.
Well, we felt that for the past 8 years in reverse, Sean, so I hear you. However, there is great anger both left and right with this madman, the leader of North Korea, and any time there is a missile launch. And it's not just from people here on television or radio, our citizens, and certainly people throughout the world, more so people in South Korea, who essentially would be the targets that we would put forth if we were to do what the president, in a sense, essentially threatened. And that's what the outrage is about. The UN was founded on diplomacy. The stage that the president used to
the same UN that's anti-Semitic, Leslie. The same UN that's anti-American, Leslie. You put faith in them. They're incompetent. They're inept. They're impotent. They've been their whole time.
Sean, for the President of the United States, the leader of the free world,
that pays the
to stand
bill.
on the UN stage and essentially threaten war, and in addition, Sean, to play God and to talk about
I love how you say the
nations and
president's
people
threatening
going
war.
to hell.
You got it ass backwards. You got it backwards. Joe Concha.
Can I give an example, since we're talking about media, of bias in broad daylight?
Yeah.
All right. So there is a photo of Secretary Kelly yesterday, the Chief of Staff, General Kelly. And I asked your producers, actually, to grab that, because this is a perfect example.
I love guests that come with their own props. Go ahead.
Well, okay. Well, you got to make points, and visual aids are the key. So there's a photo of him, and he actually has his hand in his head. And this was supposedly taken, there it is, during President Trump's speech. So this goes viral. It's on Twitter Moments. And basically the narrative is this, that Kelly is exasperated. He is so surprised by what President Trump is saying in the speech. Now, here's the reality. I believe that probably a chief of staff probably saw a speech going out to the free world beforehand. He's not surprised by anything in that, but the narrative becomes that
they've been working on the speech the president's been working on the speech for a month. He saw the speech.
Of course.
So they lie. Basically, you're saying, just like with the whole issue of when Trump tweeted out March 4th and said, oh, it looks like we're being spied on, or whatever the term was, or eavesdropped on. Everyone said, they called him a liar. Mm-hmm. Well, it was happening, Joe. And Sarah Carter, John Solomon, Mark Levin, myself, and a few others were right.
So people will say, so where'd that picture come from? What,
well,
is it doctor?
Point
no.
is well taken.
Here's the thing. If you take 1,000 shots of somebody during a 47-minute speech, and you know this from when segments go on like a Mediaite or somewhere, they're going to get that one bad shot of you accidentally rolling your eyes, or your mouth is agape, or whatever. So that's what happens.
You mean they do all that on purpose?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let me go to Leslie. Leslie, let me ask you a question. Do you think when Bill Clinton bribed North Korea that it worked, or the Iranian deal bribery is going to work? Do you really believe that capitulation and appeasement works? Please tell me you're not that foolish. Please.
Well, first of all, with North Korea, I think that I hate to say that I agree with Steve Bannon on North Korea. And a lot of people do. Clapper and others.
Okay, we all
and what
agree
we
on
saw
China,
in the
but
past
that's not my question. Stop avoiding my question.
No, not China,
not China. Is the bribery of the Iranian mullahs going to work? Do you believe that nonsense?
If you feel that Bill Clinton bribed that individual, then you have to feel that George W. George W. Bush did as well. We had the same problem with the past three administrations, Sean.
She won't answer.
One of which was a Republican administration.
Did bribery work? It didn't work, and it's not going to work in Iran. Am I right or wrong?
Sean,
well, obviously,
what we have with Iran, the deal that we have with Iran, without the deal to Iran, we put Israel at further risk. Actually, without the deal, Israel is more
You're living
at
in a
risk.
fantasy world.
I think when it came to this speech and the media reaction, there is a peer pressure that exists now, particularly at other networks, to be as provocative and negative as possible. Because we saw an earlier example from this year, Van Jones. He said that the president became president of the United States in a moment where it was during the joint session of Congress, and there was a widow who just lost her husband. And Van Jones actually said something positive. And he was eviscerated on social media and by his peers. How could you say something positive about this president? So that's what happens now. You get ostracized if you go positive in any capacity with this president.
We've had 11 months of lying. And tick-tock, tick-tock, it's all going to be exposed. And we'll be on the forefront of it. All right, Leslie, if I ever want a dictator to be nice, I'll give him money and I'll say, please be nice, and we'll see if that works. Coming up, Greg Jarrett, Sarah Carter. And welcome back to Hannity Reports. Former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort was wiretapped by the federal government before and after the election. It has shocked many in the mainstream media, but not veteran journalist Cheryl Atkinson, who was out with a new op-ed titled, "It looks like Obama did spy on Trump just as he apparently did to me." Atkinson accuses the Obama administration of potentially, follow the word, weaponizing intelligence for years. Meanwhile, Fox News is reporting a shocking new revelation. The Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, has been interviewed by Robert Mueller's team. Wait a minute. He's the one that appointed Mueller. Conflict of interest? Here with reaction. Fox News anchor, attorney Greg Jarrett from circanews.com. Sarah Carter. All right. Wow. So Comey, Mueller's best friend, purposely leaks to get the special counsel, ends up being his best friend.
Right.
Rod Rosenstein, because Sessions, I don't know why he accuses himself. And then we have Rosenstein being interviewed by Mueller. Okay, tell me what's wrong legally with this.
You know, it's a house of mirrors. Everything's backwards and crazy. Rosenstein should recuse himself. He can't be prosecuted.
Rosenstein, I didn't mean to miss. Whatever. Okay.
Who cares?
Okay.
We'll call him RR.
Okay.
So RR should recuse himself.
Right.
You can't be a prosecutor and a witness, a key witness, all in the same case. That's the kind of stuff you get disbarred for. He should be not only recusing himself, he should be disbarred for doing it. It's outrageous, and it just shows you the entire thing is a charade and a sham, that Mueller and Comey and Rosenstein are colluding to get Trump.
It certainly seems that way, Sarah, and they've been at this forever. But we don't have an investigation into Hillary, although the fix was in with Comey to bring him back into it. Comey's should be under greater investigation. Then we have all the other issues they haven't been investigating, the surveillance, unmasking, leaking of intelligence. In this case, Trump was right on March 4th, and you were right on March 8th, right here on this show, saying a FISA warrant was issued.
Yes. I mean, Sean, we said earlier on in March, both John Solomon and I, when we uncovered the fact that there was a FISA warrant issued on Trump's server, a server that was located outside of Trump Tower, and they were seeing these pings. Apparently, this is what the FBI said. There were pings going between Trump's server and Alpha Bank in Russia. And then Alpha Bank now, and they have been asking for an investigation into this, believe that they were hacked. And that those pings, and they have proof of it, that those pings were actually generated by somebody who hacked into their server to make it appear, what they say allegedly, to make it appear that their bank's server was in communication with Trump's server. But even at the same time, I was hearing reports, John was hearing reports from our sources that people within the Trump administration believed that there was wiretapping within Trump Tower. And now with Paul Manafort's revelation, we know that that's true. It wasn't just Paul Manafort. It was everybody that Paul Manafort was talking to. Everybody that he was talking to, not just President Trump, but people within the campaign. I might have made a call or two.
I might be in there. Hi, guys.
Yeah.
Good to talk to y'all. You know, it's not
in there.
funny, though.
No, it's not funny at all. This is a serious, serious violation of our Fourth Amendment rights. And when you think about what Cheryl Atkinson wrote, Sean, this is what's so important. You can't target American citizens in these overseas FISA warrants. This is so difficult. I don't think the American people really understand this. What you can do is target overseas foreigners. And then those, if they're talking to somebody in the United States, those numbers are completely masked. The names are masked. And
it's supposed to be.
Well, they're supposed to be, but only if something...
Minimization's supposed to occur.
Yeah, but think about this, Sean. What happened was, if what we're hearing is true, they were actually targeting the people within the Trump campaign.
A political opposition, a political opponent using the weaponry that is all so powerful to keep Americans safe. That is, we have no Fourth Amendment protections if that, and it appears it happened. And we haven't even mentioned Samantha Power and unmasking and Susan Rice and Ben Rhodes. Let me get Greg to weigh in on this.
FISA courts are anathema to democracy. They shouldn't even exist. They're star chambers. They're secret. You can conjure all manner of fabrication, including the anti-Trump dossier, which was apparently used to get the Manafort warrant. It was totally fake. And I think if the judges who approved the warrant knew that the evidence was fabricated, they would be more than angry. We shouldn't have FISA courts. I understand electronic surveillance of Americans talking to terrorists abroad. But FISA courts and spying on Americans, including a presidential candidate, an incoming president.
The Americans should be off limits without
a warrant. It should not exist.
Unreasonable search and
seizure. We need to get rid of FISA courts.
All right. Thank you both. When we come back, members' youth football team took a knee during the national anthem. Judge Janine has a lot to say about this. She'll be debating. Dennis Kucinich next.
This is a Fox weather alert. I'm Jackie Ibanez in New York. Hurricane Maria knocking out power to all of Puerto Rico, and flash flood warnings are in effect for the U.S. territory right now. The storm slamming into the island as a Category 4 storm, but has since been downgraded to a Category 2 hurricane. Hurricane Maria is being blamed for at least 9 deaths across the Caribbean. It's now projected to pass the northeastern coast of the Dominican Republic, but does not pose a threat to the U.S. mainland. And Tuesday's powerful 7.1 magnitude earthquake in central Mexico is now blamed for at least 230 deaths. Rescuers are desperately searching the rubble for survivors tonight. Teams from Ecuador, Panama, Chile, El Salvador, and Israel have joined the efforts or are on their way. In Mexico City, the hardest hit area, more than 40 buildings collapsed. I'm Jackie Ibanez. Now back to Hannity for all of your headlines. Log on to foxnews.com. You're watching the most powerful name in news, Fox News Siena.
And welcome back to Hannity. So over the weekend, well, members of a youth football team from outside of St. Louis, they took a knee during the national anthem in protest. Now, I want to make something very clear. I'm not attacking kids. They were like 8, 9 years old. They're innocent in all of this. But I do have questions for their coaches, the parents. Have you told these children what makes America great? Or do you talk about what makes America a horrible place? Do you talk about all the men and women that sacrifice blood, sweat, tears, and death and sacrifice for their freedoms? And why are they doing this? Joining us now with reaction, former Congressman, Fox News contributor Dennis Kucinich, and the host of the hit show, #1 on weekends, Justice, with Judge Jeanine Pirro. Dennis, is America fundamentally a good and great country? Fundamentally, is it a good and great country?
Yes, I love the country. I mean, you know, I wouldn't take a knee for a Star-Spangled Banner, but, you know, it is constitutionally protected free speech.
No issues with what is free speech and not free speech. That's not what I'm asking. Has America been a country that, in the wisdom of our framers and founders, they put in place a system where we correct wrongs, correct injustices, make a more perfect union? Is that fair?
Well, that's what it's all about. I mean, I always keep a copy of the Constitution with me because I think
know you
that
do.
This is our guide, and in times of trouble, we can go to it. And I think that when you have young people who are involved in nonviolent, constitutionally protected protest, that's not a bad thing. And you have to go back to the civil rights movement.
Do you think these kids look pretty young to me? I don't know their exact ages, but they look young enough for me that I don't think they're fully versed in America's good and bad, but I'd say mostly good.
Sean, these kids are 8 years old for the most part. The coach says he took advantage of a teaching moment to talk to these kids when they asked about what was going on in St. Louis. Now, he then circles the team. He tells them, one of the kids says, well, this is because blacks are being killed by cops and the cops don't go to jail, right? The coach brings them all around and says, okay, so if you want to take a bended knee. The teaching moment was when this coach should have said, this is a country where we respect the flag and the Star-Spangled Banner. And if he wanted to make it a teaching moment, how about talk about law and justice and authority and respect? And unless you want to dissect that trial, took the words out of my mouth, unless you want to dissect the trial and explain to them about justification and a jury verdict, then, you know, you shouldn't let them do it, period.
I wonder, and this was my thought, Dennis. I just sat there, I was watching the kids, watched the video. I saw it on Fox and Friends this morning, and I was thinking to myself, do the kids know how many other Americans fought, bled, died, sacrificed for, you're right, their constitutional right to take that knee? I kind of suspect if I asked them, a lot of them wouldn't know. And then it goes to me, it goes to that coach, and it goes to the parents. And fundamentally, are they serving these kids well by not explaining the full context and texture of the country before they act in a way that I would argue they probably didn't know completely what they were doing?
Well, you know, I've thought about this, and I was rereading Dr. Martin Luther King's book, written in '64, Why We Can't Wait. And in it, he talks about young people, children, being involved in the civil rights movement. And I see this as an expression. I think that you and the judge are 100% right in terms of we need to teach children about our country and its history and the people who sacrificed for it. But
do you agree with me they probably don't know?
I don't know. I have to tell you, there's some pretty sharp children out there who
come on.
kind of
Look, here's the bottom line. You know what? The right to protest and the right to freedom of speech, the right to assemble, that's wonderful. I want to teach the kids that, too. Civil rights, we got to teach our kids that. But not as it goes against the symbolism of the Star-Spangled Banner, the American flag, and everything we stand for, the justice system, authority, right.